Go ahead, Dr. B. Your video is not coming.
Sorry?
Your video stopped. Okay, there you go.
Sir, I just started it.
Yeah. I got it.
Okay.
All right.
So as I was saying, 62 war, we did not do very much at all. Things were pretty bad at this end also because of the danger of atomic war started because of the deployment of uh, things in Cuba by Russia. So it was just locally just too nasty. And 63, of course, we lost Kennedy, and it was painful again. 65 war, yes, we did work with local students and so on, went to the embassy and whatnot. And I think B.K. Nehru was the ambassador at that time. And he told us, well, we will let you know what you can precisely do. So we did participate, but in a very minor kind of way. Then it's also true that in 64, I got married. In 67, my older son was born. 70, my younger son was born. And during that time, 64 through 70, unfortunately, the Vietnam War, which the United States has no business getting into, became a very serious problem. Because at that time, there was draft. The students are being drafted, so they were objecting, and the universities blew up. The University of Maryland, which was relatively conservative, was one of the last one to blow up, but it did blow up. And my students still remind me from time to time that I was pretty much the only faculty member in physics who would tell his students, look, I know what you are learning here is very important, but there is a madman in the White House who is insisting on making things worse in Vietnam by going into Cambodia and so on, and Laos. So go out and object.
Mm.
Well, of course, when the students started agitating, the police and the local sheriffs were, you are well aware, that they are extremely unhappy and gave the students all kinds of negatives. So, amongst other faculty, we arranged that we should start policing the university campus so that we can keep the students and the police separated from each other so no violence will come about. In fact, I still remember my son was born the 13th of May in the morning, and on the 12th of May, quite late in the evening, I was still walking about in the hallways. At that time, that was a very bad week because just a few days before that, in Ohio, the the guards had done something very nasty. They managed to kill 4 undergraduates. And there is still the picture of that young woman who was sitting there yelling. It, it was a picture which told everybody that something very unfortunate had been done. But again, the country was totally split. There were those who thought patriotism meant that we should destroy everything in Vietnam, and those who meant that in the process of destroying, we were destroying our own souls. So the best thing is to go. Anyway, fortunately, finally, we did get beaten and we were thrown out of Vietnam. And I wish we had actually learned something, but we hadn't. But anyway, that's it. In 71, of course, as you know, Pakistan started hurting its eastern wing. 71, Bangladesh was born. And there were several people from here who had some connections there, and we learned that they needed help. So we organized a concert, and we raised not very much money, probably close to $3,000. But anyway, we sent some stuff to Bangladesh. So that brought more people into various kinds of active situations, but they didn't reach very far. In '89, I got slightly involved with what is now called the Sadbhav Mission. Bipin Tripathi, who was visiting from IIT Delhi in our plasma group, he had started this group talking about Gandhi's work and talking about harmony in India. So I worked with them a little bit, but the big time was '92, when my younger son graduated from Cornell with a fairly high quality degree in electrical engineering. And then I said, now that both my sons are graduated, I have a possibility of making careers in which they can contribute to society. This is the time when I should start working on other children. So to teach myself at that point, as you can see, I had not really lived in India for a very long time. There were visits, but they were typically 1-2 week visits and so on. There had been a sabbatical in '68, '69, but that was almost entirely at IIT Kanpur. So I decided the best thing to do is to make arrangements to go have another sabbatical, go back to India and visit, stay in all four corners. I began with Tata Institute in Mumbai, went to Central University in Hyderabad, went to IIT Kharagpur in Bengal, and then IIT Delhi. And that's when I realized that no matter how much time I had been away from India, my innards were still there. And I said, well, also the children are now old enough to be able to develop their careers. So now is the time to get started on doing something in India. I had been doing a little bit with my nephew for some time. He was working with cancer patients and whatnot, and I had done a little. But anyway, when I came back to Maryland, that's when I began to learn a little more about what Ravi had started here and 5 other graduate students. I had attended some of their meetings before I went to India, but in '93, July, August, when I returned, I went to a meeting, and that's when I think one of the people, oh dear, I'm trying to remember his name. Anyway, he was the one who asked me, so Dr. Bhagat, you are going to start coming to our CSHs every week? I said, yes, why not? Let me try. So that's how it began. And right in the beginning, I began to realize that, yes, the previous groups with whom I had worked had not been terribly committed to what we needed to do in India. But from everything I learned, fairly quickly became clear that AID was a group which was really committed to do something. And that's how it began.
How did you find them different to your previous groups or organizations that you worked with?
Well, the previous organizations, the main thing that was being done was we would just raise money and then not spend any time trying to find out how to use it in the best possible way, not trying to do anything on the ground and whatnot, except in a very sort of superficial manner. But once I began with these guys, first of all, there were visitors from India, various people who clearly were talking about things right on the ground, and with whom we could actually do something right on the ground. Dr. Parmeshwar Rao, Dr. Parmeshwaran, and people like that. So we started with this. At that time, of course, this was the only group in College Park at the University of Delhi. We had started meeting once a week, and slowly, steadily, it became clear that, of course, there were several other visitors, Jam from uh, Tamil Nadu and whatnot, who had ideas on what we could do. So tiny projects were being done in various places. We did, but slowly and steadily, it became clear that we had to organize things. 97 was when we had the first set of all chapters meet, although there were no more than 4 or 5 chapters. There were less than 40 people when the so-called bylaws were adopted. The 47 August 15 was a big day. We met at on the steps of the physics department, essentially at midnight, and of course sang the national anthem. But probably one of the few times when we sang part of the national anthem which normally is not sung. Professor Amarjit Singh, who had been my teacher for a long time, was now visiting Maryland. He taught us that there is another sentence which ends up talking about how Hindus, Muslims, and Christians are a part of the system. That paragraph is not sung normally. Anyway, uh, Srinath had written the pledge that we were going to take, and that night we pledged that whatever else we do, we will do our level best to make sure that whatever we have available will go to serve the people of India in any possible way that we can. So Balaji and I, we were, as you well know, here, if you have a public meeting, this was not public, but a meeting where you have a foreign flag, you must also have the American flag. And in fact, you have to sing the American anthem also, which we did. So at the end of the meeting, Balaji and I both walked into the room number 1219 of the physics department, where we usually met. And we shook hands and we said, now there is no question of turning back. We have started on the path and we are going to work and continue. And that is when, that evening is when, not evening, in the middle of the night, Balaji said, my plan is to go back to India to work full time. So I said, I will support you.
Mm.
I had been reading about the fact that when Gandhi returned to India, he planned to work as a barrister and earn money to support his family. And Gokhale and others, Gokhale didn't last for very long, but anyway, others told him that what you can do for India, because of his development of Satyagraha and so on, what you can do for India totally transcends anything that you can do for your family. So you go ahead and work for India, and we will find the support.
Mm.
I said, how can there be a better example than that? That's a fantastic paradigm. So that's where the concept, at that time it used to be called Aid Fellow. That's where the concept came, that we should support people who want to go back to India full time and give them nominal support for them and their families. So he went back. The following year, I followed him. At that time, I used to go to India every 2 years in order to visit various chapters and whatnot. And eventually, of course, Ravi also became. And at 2000, Balaji was back. He had developed some ideas of working in the so-called 100 block plan and so on and so forth. We spent quite a bit of time. He's explaining to me what he had in mind. And the 2000 conference, we got there was also a request from uh, Bangalore. I'm trying to think of the name. Anyway, he wanted some support. So we had been thinking at the meantime also that if we only work with people who return from here, our horizons will get very narrow. We should try and find senior people in India who we can adopt and use with them. So at the Boston meeting, I got agreement from people to establish the so-called Sati program. This would be 2 years at the most, small extension. So then the question arose, Srinath's then, not wife, but eventually they got married, Shri Lakshmi. So she said, well, now that you have got this Sati business, what are you going to do with the other guys? So I said, give me half an hour. Let me go walk around the steps of Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So 25 minutes later, I walked back up to Sri Lakshmi. I told her, look, let us distinguish between Sathis and Jivan Sathis. Jivan Sathis are the people who will work with us for the rest of their lives. Sathis are one whom we will encourage to work with us over limited times. So that's how the word Jivan Sathi was born. So as I said, eventually Ravi became a Jivan Sathi also, and some time later, Aravinda joined him and whatnot. So that sort of put up steps on the ground.
Right.
Balaji's return really put a sort of, for the first time, AID had a permanent footprint on India. Within 2 years, when in 98 January, I visited with him. He had been there only a few months, but he had started work in various places. I went with him to, I still remember, Nemeli block. And this was my first visit to Indian villages. And what I learned for the first time was that the farther away you got from the main road, the poorer the people became. And the last house where we were, I just could not believe what I saw. They had probably, they had some rice. They had probably 50 to 100 grams of dal, which they were going to use for a week for the whole family. So their idea of, well, their only food was essentially dal boiled in a lot of water, which they would then pour on the rice and eat it. And I embarrassed everybody in some sense, because I just couldn't believe that this was the same morning. I started crying. And that told me that whatever I had in mind, I would have to increase it by a significant amount. If I was really meant to do anything. I mean, India is so enormous that we can only make a trivial change. But he told me, whatever I can do, I will do. So that, if you like, is the driving force. The people of India are the driving force. The realization that I can sit down and eat a complete meal, but at the same time, there are thousands, if not millions, who have not eaten for a whole day and may not get to eat until even next day. So then justice has no meaning under those circumstances. Talking about freedom has absolutely no meaning. We can use all kinds of fancy phrases, but the fact is that life begins when people at least can live in a way where a mother does not have to see her children go to bed, or they go bed in the bed, or go to sleep at night hungry. Something is fundamentally wrong, and that is the story, so to speak.
That was quite moving, Dr. Bhagat, and I think yeah, you've in this 1 hour I learned so much. I'm sure your students who have been your students have learned immensely, and the lessons they would probably carry for their rest of their lives.
The beauty
Um,
is that I still believe when anybody says that you can't do much, and I believe in Gandhi's serious statement when somebody asked him, this is something which we did when I was writing that thing for Gandhi, and that was, do you suspect humanity? And he says, never. You are born of love, you are raised in love, your mother fills your heart with love. Where there is love, there must be peace. So at the bottom of it all, the human being must desire peace. Our job is to recognize what is in these hearts and build on it. That is why you are aware, I remind everybody of Gandhi's talisman, that never forget, but no matter what little you do it, because that can make a difference in somebody's life, and that's what's important.
right.
Okay?
Thank you very much, Dr. B. I think that was a wonderful answer that you gave. What does Dr. B mean? I think one has to listen through this entire interview to really understand and gauge what drives Dr. B even at this age.
Well,
You're one of the most active volunteers that AID has been very extremely fortunate to have, and we hope to, have you for many, many more decades.
well, as I said, the beauty of AID is that it gives me the opportunity to do something. That's the beauty of AID.
Right.
And the young people in AID, it is remarkable. I just don't know what is the motivation. In fact, Michael was visiting one day. Almost everybody from India has, I'm delighted to say, has been in this house. Uh, and he said, how do you decide who to encourage? So there are these 30 people. I said, there is no way to know. The only thing you can see is there are people who have fire in their stomach and they will do it. We are lucky that they walk by and could continue and decide to stay. That's the basis of AID.
Right.
Anyway, thank you very much. God bless you and the family.
Thank you, Dr. B. I love the conversation. Thank you very much for your time.
God bless. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.